Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Theater Podcast, intimate personal conversations with the industry's biggest names. I'm your host, Alan Seals, and this episode is with Donny Most, who you probably know as Ralph from Happy Days. He can now be seen in a new play called Middletown that was actually in the middle of its run when Broadway shut down, and the producers expertly pivoted, put it online, and now you can stream it through the beginning of April. So please check the show notes right now to make sure that you don't miss your opportunity to watch this, get your tickets, and then when it comes back after COVID, they want to bring it back and start doing it in real life again. So fingers crossed. This guy loves performing. We talk so much about his love for singing, and he goes back to making music and making more songs and doing these amazing old school like jazz standards and crooning standards every chance he gets. You can tell he has a genuine love for the arts, and he was such a pleasure to talk to. Donny, if you're listening, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. Find me online on Instagram and Twitter at theater_podcast. I'm on Facebook /official theater podcast. Please leave a rating and a review. And now everybody, please enjoy this episode with Donny Most.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Today's guest rose to fame as Ralph on Happy Days, but is an incredibly multi-talented individual with an amazing career spanning decades across the stage and screen, with additional credits including The Love Boat, MASH, Glee, Edtv, Star Trek Voyager, Sabrina, Sliders, The Bold and the Beautiful, and Family Guy, one of my favorite episodes. In addition, he's an accomplished singer, producer, director, and writer, and has adapted beautifully to the current times of COVID, starring in a virtual production called Middletown, now available for streaming. Check the show notes for that link. Donny Most, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
Thank you, Alan. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I've heard you referred to, people refer to you online as Donny, Mr. Most. Like, what should I call you today?
Whatever strikes you at the moment is fine. I'll answer Don or Donny, even Ralph occasionally. I was going to say we'll start with that, but I don't want to start with that. I actually want to go back to the beginning, right? Because we were talking before we started recording about Brooklyn. You grew up in Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn now, and so many great people, yourself included, come out of Brooklyn. Tell me about where you grew up and when did you start thinking about pursuing this, or even as a hobby, let alone a profession? Okay. Well, growing up in Brooklyn, I grew up in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn, Ocean Avenue near Church Avenue, just a few blocks from Erasmus Hall High School. And it was it was a great environment to grow up in. I sometimes feel that it was helpful for me. I think for actors, in general, I mean, you need to be able to adapt. You need to be able to, and there's such stimuli and stimulus and the energy and all the different types of people. Because it really was a melting pot when I grew up there. Probably, and it still is, I'm sure. But I think all those things were important. And the kind of childhood that I had, playing ball with my friends. I grew up in an apartment building, and then there was a little court, a street, which was not very heavily traveled. So we would play, punch ball or football, two-hand touch in the street, with the cars parked on either side, and then go down the block to where the subway station was. There was a wall. We played stickball. And then if you went down a few blocks from there, was the parade grounds, which had all these great baseball fields, tons of baseball fields, and you'd play there. And then of course, Prospect Park, which was, so I think it was a great childhood. And like I talked about, all the different neighborhoods and, ethnicities and Erasmus Hall, we had 8,000 students. So, you're exposed to a lot, and
Wow.
so and then I first started. By the way, Barbara Streisand went to Erasmus, and Lainey Kazan and Barbara Stanwyck, and a lot of people, Mae West. So yeah, I think there's something about growing up in that kind of a neighborhood. Those neighborhoods. There's something about it that I think was helpful. Maybe stimulated people to want to pursue the business. Now, in response to your question, when did I first start wanting to think of it even as a hobby? Well, I was very young. I was 9 years old, and I saw the movie The Jolson Story, which was the biopic of the great Al Jolson. And I was 9, and I saw that they had $1 Million movie back then, which was on Channel 9. And they would pick a movie for a week, and they'd show it twice a night, every night, and then 4 times Saturday and 4 times Sunday. So my friend, I was in 3rd grade or something, and he said, "Did you see the movie on $1 Million movie last night?" This was Tuesday morning. I remember. And I said, "No, I'd never heard of Jolson. I didn't even know who he was talking about." So I watched it that night, and it had this profound impact on me. I loved it. I loved the talent of Jolson, even though it was Larry Parks playing Jolson, but it was Jolson's voice, and Parks did a great job of capturing Jolson, and the music. I grew up. My mom was a teenager and a young adult during the 40s swing era, so she had a lot of those albums, but then hearing Jolson do it, that kind of music, I became. It was like this new birth for me, and I went and got his albums, and I'd go around singing Jolson stuff, in the house, and for my grandparents singing Mammy and all that kind of stuff. and then, I do plays and stuff, but I didn't really want to admit to people that this is what I wanted to do. I thought they'd think I was, I don't know, it just seemed that, to be a baseball player, that's what I wanted to be Mickey Mantle too. So that's what I would talk about, but not that I wanted to act and sing. But finally, at the age of 13, when I had my bar mitzvah, and I got up with the band and sang Rockabye Your Baby with a Dixie melody, and everyone went nuts. And then everyone said, "Oh, he's got to do something." And then my parents realized this is, what I kind of wanted. Well, at least I had a strong proclivity towards it. And they found me a school in Manhattan that, had kids and teenagers that they would teach for singing, acting, and dancing. So that's when I started really kind of going after it at the age of 13.
13 you started, and then I was reading you get your first big break at 15. So
Right.
like less than 2 years between starting and getting a big break. Like that's kind of unheard of. There's some people that have been at it for 20 years who haven't gotten a big break yet, more so.
Oh, yeah, but I don't know if it was a big break. I mean, to me at the time, it felt like a big break. I got picked from that school. The guy who ran the school would handpick some of the students and create like a nightclub review. He called them the Broadway show-offs, and because his studio was on 1650 Broadway, very famous building. Funny story. It's the same building that 45 years later, I get a gig to perform we'll get to that later, my singing, my jazz show, at the Iridium Jazz Club, which was based in the same exact spot where I was going to school for Charlie Lowe's studio, where I was going at 13 years old, the same spot. But anyway, I got picked to be in that review. And so I spent the summer, right when I was 14, turning 15, singing in this nightclub act up in the Catskill Mountains resort area, all the hotels that had the nightclubs. So it felt like a big thing for me. I was like 15 years old. Now here I am up there I had 3 numbers, I remember. And so it was kind of a big break for me at the time. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't know if it really was. But, it put me on the path. And then I decided to shift my focus more into acting after that summer. I don't know. I think it was because I knew my father kind of thought it was a good idea, he saw me do a play somewhere, and he thought it would be good to balance it with some real serious, more of a serious acting class, that kind of thing. So that's what I did after somewhere when I was 15, 16 is when I did that.
So that's very aware of your father at that time to realize that, a good performer on stage needs to be able to sing and act, right? Especially if he's not involved with this business at all.
Yeah. When I look back at it, he was very wise about that. And it's not like they were pushing me. I was the one who really, they were just being supportive. But when he saw, I think he also saw that the singing, that particular thing, he knew that was limited, and he was right. I mean, where was I going to, at that age, to do that kind of, maybe the singing would come into play in musical theater. So therefore, you're right. Therefore, he's thinking then I need to round out the acting skills so that the music would come into play there.
Yeah, that was fortunate. Sometimes all it takes is one thing, one teacher, one moment. Kudos to your dad for helping you out with that. But,
absolutely.
So you're going towards this acting route, and then I'm looking at your IMDb profile here, and it's like the first credited thing is as like the equivalent of a Law and Order corpse. I think you were dead body on MASH.
Well, there's a mistake there. People, I guess I should tell IMDb, I was not on MASH. There must have been somebody
another Don?
Or that looked like me. And so it's a mistake because other people have said to me, "Oh, I saw you were on MASH," or "I saw you on MASH." And I'm going, "No, I was never on MASH." So that wasn't me. So my first real credit on IMDb would have been an episode of either Emergency or Room 222, because those were the ones I did first when I got to LA. When I originally came out just for a summer after my junior year in college, I landed those roles. Those were my first two.
Oh, wow. Okay, so junior year of college, so you're 19, right? And because I was reading you got Happy Days at 20.
Yeah, I was 19 when I first got there. What happened was I still was, so after I enrolled in that workshop, Eleanor Rabb was the teacher, great woman, and I met a manager through her who started working with me, and I got out on mainly because I had red hair, the blue eyes. They thought I'd be great for commercials, so I was getting a lot of auditions for commercials, and then I did like 40 of them from the time I was 16 till I was 20, and a lot of them were big national commercials, so it was cool. It was a good thing.
That's good money.
But I wanted to do more than, I wanted to act, and I wasn't getting up for too many other things. Theater. I did get up. I came close on a couple of Broadway shows. I was up for the original Jesus Christ Superstar on Broadway, and I had like 3 callbacks. And I thought, okay, then the fourth time, though, I didn't make it through the dance audition is what I think knocked me out of there. But I came close on that, and there was another show I came close on, but I didn't quite get. And they were few and far between, those auditions. And I knew that back then, film and TV were mainly being shot in Los Angeles, not New York then. Soap operas were being shot, and Broadway and commercials. Those were the things that were being done. So for film and TV, I decided, let me go out, spend the summer after my junior year, get some connections and maybe get my feet wet. And then after I graduate, I'll come back here. But what happened was when I got out there for that summer, I had an agent pretty quickly because of the agents that I was working with in New York referred me to some people. And then, so I was lucky several wanted to sign me, and I picked one, and they sent me out on some auditions, and I landed, a couple of parts very quickly. So when I was supposed to go back to college, I actually flew back at the end of the summer, and I wound up talking to my manager at my sister's wedding, said, your agent thinks you have a good shot of, you've got some momentum. So take 6 months off of school and let's see what we can do, because he's got some momentum. So I didn't even think. It was animal instinct. I said, yes, that's what I'm doing. And literally 2 days later, I'm on a plane back to California. I don't know anybody. I met a guy at the summer school at UCLA where I was staying, So I found an apartment in the same complex that he was in. And then, then I did a police story where, although that might have been late, it was very dramatic. I was much more interested in pursuing drama than
Really?
comedy. Oh, yeah, I was not looking to do comedy at all. Emergency, I played a guy who got paralyzed in a car accident. Then police story, I played a psychopathic mad bomber. But then, and then nothing for like months. And I was 2 months. And then I thought, oh, I made a mistake. But then I got the audition for Happy Days and several callbacks and then a screen test. So that's how that all came about.
So, gosh, I mean, you're skipping over some pivotal stuff that I think a lot of people.
Okay.
Well, no, I mean, it's kind of inconsequential, I think, to you at this point. But you're like, oh, I had a manager when I was in college. I already had a manager from New York, so we don't need to talk about that. But great, you had a manager. Then you moved to LA. Immediately had an agent out there, and then going on these auditions. You only go 2 months without getting work, which, looking back at the last 12 months of Broadway here, 2 months is nothing, right?
Nothing, right?
Yeah. And then all of a sudden laying Happy Days. So you're already on this sort of meteoric rise, and then Happy Days hits and you're like straight up, right? Like, what happens at that point?
Yeah. That was certainly a major, kind of like the Twilight Zone is what, your life is totally different. It was an incredibly exciting time. And I should mention that when I got the offer on a Friday night, my agent and I, we decided to turn it down. We passed on it because, as I mentioned earlier, I was more interested in drama.
Yeah.
And I was up for a TV movie that was a dramatic period piece, World War II, with great director, the guy who directed the original Brian song, Buzz Kulick, and the writer who wrote a movie called The Summer of 42, which I loved. So I wanted to do that. And I had a great audition. And my agent said, you have a good chance at this. So when we got the offer for Happy Days on a Friday night, it was like I was much more interested in the drama. So we passed on Happy Days, and I wasn't going to do it. But my agent happened to play basketball every Saturday at Gary Marshall's house. The guy who created,
Right.
The guy who created the show and who's the executive producer. And we all know who Gary Marshall is. So Gary took my agent aside during the break in the basketball game and said, what's with your boy turning us down? Well, you know what? We'll give him 10 episodes as a guarantee instead of 7. And instead of $750 an episode, we'll give him $1,000. And he told my agent it had a really good chance of going on the air. So, making it, because you shoot a pilot, 95% of them don't go on the air.
Right.
So my agent said on Monday, maybe we should think about this, So anyway, I did it. And then, yes, everything changed, but it wasn't really, we became sort of a minor hit in the first year. We didn't become number one until the third season, but still it was a major change in my life, working as a regular on a TV show with it was an amazing cast, great people that we all got along incredibly well, not only personally, but professionally. We just respected each other because we took the work pretty seriously, all of them. We worked hard. It was a lot of talented people working hard to make it look easy. We were kind of dismissed early on. I think they thought we were a bunch of, teenagers or whatever, goofing off, having a good time. But we were very serious about the work. And we had a genius director, Jerry Paris, who did all the old Dick Van Dyke shows. And then Gary Marshall as our top, this top guy. So it was a real tight unit. And so it was a great experience. And then when we became really huge, then your life changes dramatically. And they don't teach you in acting class. They should. They have which should have a psychologist running it. How to deal if you happen to, have your life change from being, basically regular, anonymous in the real sense of the word, and then going to where you can't walk anywhere without people knowing you. And it's not just for a week or 2 weeks or for a month. It's that's the way it is, for at least the next 10, 15 years, So it was tricky. It's tricky, where you can get sucked into kind of believing the hype and getting, lost. And luckily, we had Ron Howard as a role model who had been a star since, he was 5. And here he is with this great work ethic, down to earth, really grounded. So him setting an example, and Gary Marshall and Jerry keeping us in check, and Tom Bosley to some good degree. Here he had won the Tony on Broadway for Fiorello, and and he was a star to some pretty good degree. So we had a lot of people to mentor us and keep us, and like I said, Ron being a tremendous example. So that helped. Otherwise, you can go down the wrong path, when you get seduced by all the things that go along with that kind of crazy fame.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, I was going to bring up being in a nightclub scene when you're 15, right? So, you're being around there, I'm sure, had its own string of adventures. But then going to this place and being that well known before social media, like that
Right.
was what was so impressive about this time, I think. Part of what was so impressive is that if you're that famous and you don't have an Instagram account, there's no Facebook, there's no TikTok,
Right.
there's nothing, right? Like everyone just knows you. And that's gotta be so crazy. And I've got a friend who's a PA for a big celebrity, and she's saying like they need PAs, personal assistants, because you can't go get a Starbucks without getting mobbed. And it messes with your psyche. Like, did you seem like an outgoing guy. You seem like you're very friendly, but there's at some point when you realize like everybody talking to me probably wants something. Like, does that mess with you?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, because you don't know where they're coming from, and what, and you start to, doubt that, that any of these people might be interested in you otherwise, or want to talk to you, or not, at least not to the degree that they want to, and that everyone wants to be your friend. And so you can create like a cocoon, you can get where you put up a defense mechanism, and you go too far the other way. It could do that as well. And in many other ways, it can affect you, because then you kind of lose touch with reality a little bit. I remember at one point it really hit me, and I was in the house that I had bought. I was still pretty young, and I bought this really nice house, and it just hit me that I was losing touch with the value of money and regular things. Luckily, I was 20 when I started doing the show. I already was kind of a young adult, gone through 3 years of college, had a solid family background and support. So that helped a lot. Otherwise, like I said, it does mess with you, and I wound up seeing a psychologist for to go into have some therapy sessions, because that's why I was saying they should have that in acting classes. The one class where, just in case this happens, although it probably wouldn't be sufficient. One class probably wouldn't do it. But yes, it's a tricky road to navigate.
We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. Then when it's gone, right? And I want to, we're shifting
Right.
into Middletown, and we're shifting into the theater and the singing now.
Right.
Then you've got all these accolades and all this attention and all this money coming in and everything. And then the show stops.
Right. Well, I left the show 4 years before it ended.
Yeah.
So it stopped for me at that point. Okay. So it's still a stop. Yeah. I left it because I felt I needed to try to, I was playing one character for 7 years, and I wanted to break away from that, which was very difficult back then, when you only had 3 networks, you have 50 million people watching you, 60 as opposed to 5 million. Or so yes, it was and I made it even harder on myself, because I told my agents I don't want to do television for a while. I just wanted to try to do film and theater. And back then, it was almost impossible to go from a sitcom to film. And I found, a handful of people were able to make a successful transition into that. Travolta and Tom Hanks, and that's, back for those, that's about it. Sally Field, maybe.
Yeah.
So it was but I was 27, and I just felt it's time to try, at least make the attempt. So the next 6 months with a big agency. I couldn't even get an audition to come in and try out for a film.
Wow.
Because I couldn't even audition for I went 6 months, maybe longer. I finally got one audition, but it was more like an interview. So it was like hitting a brick wall in that regard. And I didn't do, so I did theater, to keep my sanity. I was doing plays in different parts of the country that I was able to get because of so the notoriety was good for that. But then, so that helped. And then I finally said to my agent, let's do some television. I'll do television because I needed to work.
Yeah,
I needed to work. And so and I wasn't getting the parts that the kinds of roles that I really wanted to get up for and try out for and do. But I figured I have to do it and peck away at that. The concrete or brick wall in front of me and start chipping away at it. And that's what I did. I kept, plugging away at that. And gradually it opened up more and more. And especially as I got into an older, now I'm at an age where I think that people can accept me in a very different kind of role. And there's more separation, time and distance from Happy Days. So it's making it, so I'm now there's some really cool roles have been coming my way, and some very interesting roles, dramatic, some comedy and drama, and all different. I have a movie out on Amazon Prime now called Lost Heart, where I play a local pastor in a small town in northwestern Michigan, and the town is called Lost Heart. And then MBF is a film on Amazon Prime as well that I did right before that. Very powerful, dramatic film. I play a defense attorney defending a wounded vet. So, these are all, it was like now, yes, roles are starting to come and interesting plays. I did the play Art about a year and a half ago. Great play. Won the Tony on Broadway years ago. And I got to do that. And Sunshine Boys I did with Robert Wall. And I just got cast. I'm heading to New Mexico next month to do a Lifetime movie, and then to Prague to do a film where I'm going to play a king, and it's sort of a Princess Bride kind of film, So it's and then theater, of course, Middletown, which I was doing. I mentioned a couple of plays, but then right before the pandemic, we were doing Middletown, which was an absolute joy for me to do. And then we were doing, at that time, we were in Chicago. I was supposed to be there for a month. And around the second, third week, we had to close down when all the theaters were shutting down. And we were in Atlanta before that. And it had been in New Hope, Pennsylvania, and Las Vegas. And we had others lined up. It's a great, it's an original play and very unique. And I'll let you sort of segue into that if you'd like, or if I haven't quite finished something else, we can do that too.
No, well, actually, it's a good place for it. Yeah, so Middletown, it's a 4-person show. You're starring alongside Didi Khan, who, of course, is Frenchie from Grease, Sandy Duncan, who's Peter from Peter Pan, Adrian Zamid, who's Romano, and T.J. Hooker. Like the cast of this is alone. I wanted to see all of you. I think it's going to be magic to work to see all 4 of you together. But so you were.
I think it was. I would concur with that. At least that's how the audience seemed to feel too. It really was kind of a magical ensemble.
So when was the decision made to film it for streaming?
Well, what happened was they weren't. There was good foresight, but it wasn't. Nobody had that crystal ball. But when we were at the theater in near Atlanta, I remember one day Seth Greenleaf, who's the director of the show, and his company produced it, G4 Productions, told us that they were going to be filming, for one or two performances. And they said, just to have it for archival purposes, I guess, you like to have a record of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, it wasn't going to be used for commercial reasons. That was the intent. That was the reason they shot it. Luckily they did, because then, when the pandemic hit, I don't know, several months later, I can't remember the timing, they got in touch with us and said, because everybody was figuring out what to do, and they figured out, maybe we could have a life for this play right now as a streaming entity. So they talked to us about it, and we all agreed on how it could be done, and that's how it happened. So luckily they shot it. Good thing they did.
Well, that's amazing. So it was just coincidental. Now it's out there.
Yeah.
It's let's see. I'm gonna look at my notes here. It's streaming now as this episode airs, and it's gonna streaming sales end April 4th. So everybody make sure you get it before the 4th of April. But I'm fascinated with how the industry, TV and film and theater, TV and film has come back much quicker than theater, because theater, of course, requires an in-person audience.
Right.
But all of this stuff that's happened during lockdown and COVID and this pandemic, it's been absolutely insane. And some people have completely disengaged. Some people have doubled down. They're busier now than they were beforehand.
Yeah.
So
I know.
So
Crazy.
like for you though, so you're in the middle of Middletown when lockdown happens, and then I guess everything is an unknown at that point. So what's going through your mind?
Wow, yeah, I'm trying to remember what my psyche, what was going on in my mind at the time. I mean, I was disappointed, obviously, because I wanted to continue doing the play, and we had other cities lined up. But then to some degree, it was okay to just relax a little bit. Now, the other thing that was going on was I was in the middle of recording a CD, for my singing.
Mm-hmm.
I had one out 2 years prior called Mostly Swinging, doing all the jazz standards with a great big band. But then I was in the middle of doing a new one with a producer in Nashville, where we were doing a little different, more contemporary jazz kind of feel, and some stuff from the 60s and 70s. So we were about 3/4 of the way done. I was supposed to go back to Nashville right after Middletown to finish the CD, and we couldn't. So I was, frustrated. But I took some time to just kind of relax and spend time with my wife, and that was fine for a while. But then you start getting nuts. You start going, well, what am I going to do? And now, creatively, it was good because I was able to work on my music at home, because on my computer I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working on that and trying different songs to see what we're going to finish the CD with. And then I started, and also I've developed, I've directed 3 independent features, and so I was developing some new projects. So I was working on that, and with my wife, we had 2 that we were working on together. One film script, and we got producers that really liked it and wanted to try to get it made, and we were doing rewrites based on their notes. So we were doing stuff like that, and then a TV series that we were working on together as well, based on her stuff going on in her life. She's got Parkinson's disease, and she came up with a great blog, and we adapted it into a series. So we were working on that sort of thing, and then. A producer friend called me, who I had worked with about 5 years prior, 7 years, and said the same guy who wrote the pilot that we had done 5 years ago, they were thinking of doing something that we could do now. He said, hey, we all want to be creative and productive. Here, what do you think about this? It would be a series called Viral Vignettes, and it would be like maybe 8, 9 minutes, 10-minute little pieces, short, like a scene, and it would be 2 actors, and he knew a bunch of other actors he had worked with, so they'd be people that would be recognizable. And he said, and they'll be, each one will be scripted, and you could act in some, direct some, whatever, or both. And I said, well, that sounds like a cool idea, because he said the idea would be that there's two people doing it from like we're doing right now. I mean, like a video chat or something. So one actor is in his house, the other's in the other, and the script supports that. The first one I did was a cousin of mine, supposedly, that we hadn't seen each other, and we still couldn't see each other. So we're getting back in touch, on Skype or something like that.
Right,
and
right.
that was a scene. So I brought in Robert Wool, who I had done the Sunshine Boys with, and we played cousins. It was called Old Buddies, and it was a funny, 10 minutes or whatever. And we shot it, and it came out great. And then I wound up acting in another one with Gail O'Grady, playing the same character, but now I'm talking to my therapist. She's my therapist, and I'm like having a real thing for my therapist. So that was that one. And then there's all different ones. And then I directed one with Linda Pearl and Lydia Cornell, and Anson Williams, my great friend from Happy Days. He directed one. And there were a lot of other actors. So people could go on YouTube and check it out. It's called Viral Vignettes, and check them out. They're really good. So that was a great thing to do. That worked for the times, that we were with the restrictions that we were all limited with.
That's amazing. I really enjoyed that. And there's been so many scripts, like now that a year has gone by, there have been so many scripts that have been written specifically for the Zoom platform that involve breakout rooms, right? So I actually I attended a virtual show the other night where you go into the room and you all start out together, and then depending on if you're on the alpha team or the beta team, it was a sci-fi thing, and like we had to go off into different breakout rooms in Zoom, and then and there was a voting platform, so it was kind of choose your own adventure interactive thing.
Oh my God.
And I did it right here from my office, and it was interesting. Like Zoom is not made for a performance aspect, because as an audience member, it's weird for me to be like, right up in someone's face, because when you're on when you go see a stage production, it's all about the ambiance and the shared experience and the lights and the subtlety of that sort of thing. So for me, I'm not a fan of staring at somebody and having a static shot the whole time. So I think that's a problem that needs to be overcome. But in terms of like talking about podcasting, what we're on now, radio plays are my new thing. I love a good radio play when it's written as a radio play, because you can get all of these great sound effects, and then you can manipulate the microphone and get the voice all up on it. So there's all these things you can do that are so much fun, and I really enjoy it.
That would be fun, a radio play. I'd like to do that. That would be fun.
Yeah, well, I want to go to your singing though, because we've mentioned that, and
then we should just talk. I'll talk a little. I want to tell people a little bit about Middletown, what it is, and all that.
Oh, well, before we go to singing, then let's continue with Middletown, because let's do that.
Yeah, because you mentioned, there's Dee Dee Khan, who actually her first job in L.A. was a guest role on Happy Days. She played my girlfriend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was great when I found out I was going to be working with Dee Dee in Middletown. She's so fabulous. She's great. And then Sandy Duncan, who I'd never worked with, but of course I had seen her work and knew of her, and she's just amazing to work with. And Adrian Zemed, I'd never worked with, but we had played on the same sort of entertainment league softball, softball kind of. And
that's where you make your best friends sometimes.
Yeah. So we knew each other for a long time from that, and so it is a great cast, and it's a very interesting piece because it's done in a very minimalist kind of style. There's 4 music stands on stage and 4 chairs, and the scripts are on each stand. So we're up there. But then Sandy's character, Peg, sort of serves as the narrator. So she's talking to the audience and then introduces us. And then we get into the story. It's written by Dan Clancy. It's a fabulous play. 2 couples that live in Middletown, New Jersey. And they've been friends for 33 years. And they have dinner every Friday night together, restaurant or wherever. And you go through their lives. It goes back to when they first met, and how they met, the wives met, at school because their kids were at school, and you go through their lives to get all the ups and downs, like they call it the ride of your life. It's a real roller coaster. All the things that happen when you're raising kids, and then they get married, and jobs, stuff going on at work, and problems with marriage, and then deaths, and it's a wonderful combination of that, of life in terms of the comedy and the drama, and it's done in because of the storytelling and the purity of it. It works way better than I ever expected. Because I'd never done a play like that, and I didn't know if it would have the reach that a play that has all the bells and whistles, and where you're doing it in a conventional way with this great scenery or the sets and the lighting, but this is just pure storytelling, but it takes on to this other life, and people are crying, they're laughing, and they're crying, and the reactions were amazing, just amazing. So that's why it was such a joy doing this play, and I'm looking forward to things opening up so we can get back and do it. But in the meantime, people can check it out on that platform, Overture, which I don't have the exact address, but
I'll put it in the show notes for the podcast here. Yeah,
so people could check it out, because I've heard from some people who have seen it in this format, streaming, and it's because I haven't watched it. I don't know if I was a little leery to thinking, how did they capture it? Did they have enough cameras? And I was like a little leery to see it, but I've seen some great response where they were saying it was just incredibly moving, and the performances were fantastic. And we are. It is a great team, and we really gelled wonderfully together. So I encourage people to check it out.
So are there plans that have been disclosed to you yet for it to start running again in a stage somewhere?
Nothing specific. I mean, there were some that were set up pre-COVID. I can't even remember the cities right now, but I'm hoping those will be rescheduled, and then, of course, new additional ones added to it, and so we can go all around doing it. Who knows? Maybe wind up in New York. It would be great. It'd be kind of cool. There's been some talk maybe off Broadway. It could work in an off Broadway kind of setting. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, hopefully it'll bring you back to Brooklyn, I guess.
Yeah, I would love to come back and be up on the boards in New York. I would love that.
Okay, so singing. That was the credit when researching for this that I was most surprised to learn about, because knowing you've got a TV and film career, and you very I guess, well, I'll take that back, because you do have lots of theater credits, but given what's the first connotation is TV and film, which is not a singing sort of platform. So, but you're actually an incredible singer. And when you said you were up for the final cast of the OC of Jesus Christ Superstar, I wanted to come back to that because your style is like you're a crooning like a Frank Sinatra's, like a swing sort of thing, which doesn't fit Jesus Christ Superstar.
Right. Well, the thing is that, and maybe that's why, I didn't maybe have quite enough of that legit voice, as they call it. I tried to sing it. I didn't, on those auditions, I remember I had to sing songs from the play itself. So I had to sing them the way that would be appropriate. And I did pretty well. I got through three auditions, and I wound up doing the play Damn Yankees on tour with Dick Van Dyke, and I played Joe Hardy, and I had to do that. And then I did the play I Love My Wife, which was a musical. It had a lot of singing in that, but they had different styles. But yes, my wheelhouse, the music that I have is in my blood. The passion is those great standards done with a jazz feel, swing. It could be, doesn't only have to be swinging, ballads, but with a jazz. I love the jazz and blues kind of approach to that kind of music, that. And although I'm starting to play with some other styles, I have a single that's being released. It just was released in the UK, for some reason, we're releasing it there first because we haven't finished the CD yet. And I did a song that was originally done by Smokey Robinson in 1965 called "Ooh Baby Baby," a real Motown R&B thing. But we did it with a little jazz and R&B. So I'm having fun trying some new styles. But yeah, when I get up there with a big band, or even if it's a 7-piece, 10-piece, and have those great arrangements and doing, like you said, sort of the Sinatra kind of material. I was a huge Bobby Darin fan who could do that music as good as any of them. I saw him at the Copacabana when I was 18, and he could swing and do jazz and blues and folk and anything. But he could do that kind of, that Sinatra kind of thing so wonderfully. So I loved all that. Nat King Cole and Ella Fitzgerald, all those great singers of the standards. So I'm in my house, in my territory when I'm up with a band doing that kind of music.
And you do big band stuff, but you've also directed multiple things. The Last Best Sunday was your directorial debut in 1999. Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned writing, all these other things. If you had to pick one thing now to, right. Well, okay, I was going to say, if you could only pick one thing, what would you do? But right. I think there's multiple sides of this. So I guess the first question is, what out of everything have you enjoyed the most? But then moving forward, what would you like to do that you haven't done yet?
Yeah, boy, that's okay. That's a tough one. What I've enjoyed when I'm doing on the film TV side, when the material is something that you really love, because if I'm doing music, I'm picking the greatest songs, the greatest material that I'm picking, and I'm helping to figure out the arrangements. So it's not apples to apples, because most of the time when you're acting, you don't get to pick only the best material. You're lucky if the greatest material comes your way. So, but I've tasted doing, material that I've loved, that I really think is beautifully written, and it's being done with other great people. So then I love that as much as when I'm singing some of this great stuff. But sometimes you are acting in pieces that, the material's pretty good. It's not great, or it's really good, but it's still not, you know what I mean? So it's hard to compare. Now, when I've done theater, it's usually some of these pieces were fabulous, so then I love that too. So it's really about when the material is great, whatever it is, mm-hmm. That's what I love. So now moving forward, I feel there's so much more I want to do that I haven't done yet on film as an actor, whether it be film or TV. So I'd say that's what I think my focus would be on that more than anything. Of course, a great play. I love the live theater experience, and I want to do more. But if you told me what I really want to do, or asked me, it would be, some great roles ahead for me in film and TV. That's, I want the music. I have to do, and I will hopefully, and theater. But I would zero in more on film right now. Why? I don't know. I guess if it's great material and you're working with great people, I love the fact that you could capture it in a way that is there forever, and that has been transferred onto the screen in a beautiful way. If it's all coming together, with the cinematography, the acting, the storytelling, the cinematography, the music, and it could be, there forever. That's very attractive to me.
I love the idea of writing, directing, and starring in something, because it's your vision.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't have the layers of abstraction of somebody else's vision or directorial style, or even their writing style. Like, it's one of the most straight pen to screen sort of processes that way.
Yeah. I just don't know that I'm a good enough writer that would create that great vehicle for myself. I've done some writing, working with other people. I can't write by myself, working with other people. But so if I had a great script that had a great part for me, I could take that on, because I'm directing. If I'm directing, as I love that idea. But for me to write it and star and direct, I don't know if the material would be as good as I want. I don't think I can do it as a writer.
Fair enough. Okay, so we can wrap up this episode here with the 3 standard closing questions that I ask everybody to end the episodes here. So the first one is very simply, what motivates you?
Excellence.
Good. All right. Second question then, what advice would you give to your younger self or younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
My younger self or younger people?
Both. It could be 2 different answers.
Those are different.
Okay.
Those are different. For younger people who are considering this kind of a path, is that what you mean? The
Yes.
path of,
yes.
I'd say you better love it and want to do it more than anything, and you can't think of doing anything else. Otherwise, don't bother. I do it as a hobby, but not as a career, as you alluded to earlier, because of how crazy, unfair, and ridiculous it can be. So if you love it and that's it, and that's all you're going to think about doing, then pursue it. Get into a good classes, and dive in. But otherwise, do it as a hobby. Now, for my younger self, somebody asked me the same thing, advice. I would. It's tough because having the knowledge of all those years and telling somebody younger, are they going to even understand it really? Because it's probably the typical things of really appreciating, being grateful for the achievements that you're having at the time, and don't judge them in terms of comparing it to other. That's the biggest advice, I guess, comparing it to where other people have gone. Because it could be a never-ending thing. You get on a hit show like I did, but I'm wanting to do movies. I want to do those Academy Award movies. I mean, it'll never end, because then you have to. I mean, that's sort of like an endless loop that could go on forever. So I guess the advice would be, to not to be judging it and comparing it, and just taking it in and being grateful and moving forward with that.
I love that. That's beautiful. Okay, so the last question. This is the hardest one. If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Are we talking about a TV show, a theatrical show?
Interpret any way you wish.
Wow, one show, and that's the only thing I could watch. I know there's a great answer in there for me. I have to, give me a minute or two to think about what that would be. Wow, oh man, one that I just would watch over and over and not get tired of. I might come up empty for you. Has anybody just said, I can't answer that?
No, people, the most provided answer in the theater space is Sweeney Todd.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I mean, there's so many plays that I haven't seen, being out here, I haven't been to New York, and I've missed a lot of great, great shows. So,
well, what's your favorite movie then? Do you have a favorite?
It might just be The Wizard of Oz. I might have to go with The Wizard of Oz.
Okay, we can go with that. And are you on social media?
I am. I'm on Facebook as Don Most, and on Twitter it's @Most_Don. And then on Instagram it's Don Most 1.
Because Don Most Original took your name. All right. Well, you are the original. We should get them to give you their account.
I could have said original, huh? I didn't even know that.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. You can get more of me at thetheaterpodcast.com. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook on theater_podcast. Leave a rating, leave a review wherever you are listening. This has been edited by Matthew Hendershot. Thank you to Jukebox the Ghost for the intro and outro music. And Don Most, thank you most of all. This has been incredible.
Oh, thanks, Alan. I enjoyed chatting with you and delving into all this. It was really good. Thank you.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.